Jeff, it is good morning for me, but I think it is good. Is it good evening for you or good afternoon?
It's good afternoon for me. I'm on the east coast of the United States, on Long Island, New York.
Right, right. So completely different time zone, and I think we're probably, or here in New Zealand, we're probably almost a day ahead of you. So it's in. I can tell you that tomorrow is going to be an interesting day for you.
Can you give me any stock market tips?
Yes, bye.
Fair enough.
Jeff, thank you so much for clearing some time to have a chat with me today. As I was going through your some information and getting ready for this conversation, I found that you've been selling almost your whole life, haven't you? That on your website, it says that you've been selling or have been in the selling industry for 47 years.
This is true. Yes, I started when I popped out of the womb. No, no, no. I started, I think I was around 19 years old. I was attending college in New York City, and I was not learning very much because I was a very bad student. And I decided to get a part-time job at a nearby furniture store.
Hmm.
So I still attended some of my classes like marketing and psychology because those were the ones that interested me. But I actually found I was learning more in the business world than I was in school, and I dropped out. So
Yeah.
I've been selling since I think 18 and a half years old, something like that.
Wow. Wow. So with this, it's 47 years in selling, I think 14 years managing salespeople, and over the last 16 years training. So you've been training salespeople and sales managers internationally. How did you get into sales? Obviously, you started at 18, and how did you shift through the whole journey of selling, managing, and training?
Mm. So I certainly had no intention of going into sales. My father, my stepfather, and both of my grandfathers on both sides were all career salespeople, and none of them ever really was very successful. And I swore I would never, under any circumstances, ever go into selling. And
Right.
at the furniture store I was telling you about, I was the office manager, so I did paperwork and ordering and customer service and things like that. And one day, on a Saturday, one of the salespeople called in sick and didn't show up. And we got a little bit busy. And the owner of the company said to me, "Hey, Jeff, go sell those people." Somebody had come in off the elevator. And I looked at him with panic in my eyes. Certainly my heart was pounding. I said, "I don't know how to sell." And he said these words: "Follow them around the showroom, smile a lot, take notes on what they're interested in, come back and I'll give you the pricing. That's selling."
Right.
Well, I found out there was a little bit more to it than that, but I also found out that I had some of the natural tendencies that, or natural traits that tend to make somebody more successful at sales. And by the way, if you don't have those tendencies or those traits, it doesn't mean you can't be successful at sales, but I just happen to have some of them.
Yeah.
Um, from there, it was really that I wasn't going to work at a furniture store forever. And I just answered an ad in the newspaper, which turned out to be it for another sales position at Encyclopedia Britannica, when back when people actually read books.
Yes,
And
sir.
I went
Yes.
door to door. Yeah, I went door to door selling Encyclopedia Britannica. And they actually taught me. They saw way more potential in me than I saw in myself. And very quickly after joining the company, they saw I was doing really well, and they said, "We want to teach you the art of sales management." And they did. They were really good at training how to sell and how to manage, and that's where I learned it. Um, I spent 14 years as an employee sales manager working for companies. But as part of what I do now for the last 16 years, I've owned my own firm. I train, I coach, and I also do outsource sales management. So it's all been one sales job, one sales management job after the other. It's kind of like The Godfather 3, which is the worst one. Just when you think you're out, they pull you back in. And for me, I find that sales is a great career because you have the potential to earn an unlimited amount of money. And
Yeah.
for a college dropout, that's a pretty cool thing. I get to make a rather nice living, take care of my three children, and do what I guess I was born to do.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. I would say I am one of those kids that were raised on Encyclopedia Britannica. So there's probably millions of people like me around the world who go, "Wow, yes, Encyclopedia Britannica. I have or have had one of those at home." Um, Jeff, so and I think you touched on it a little bit, but what do you really enjoy about sales?
Um, first of all, I like dealing with people. And if you don't like dealing with people, you're going to have a pretty tough time in sales. So
Mhm.
I like making new friends. I like having conversations, which to me, that's all sales is really about. Uh, Most people think that, excuse me, that sales is about convincing or persuading or talking people into things. Those are the traditional definitions. But to me, it's just a conversation or a series of conversations leading to help the other person choose to do business with you. So I like chatting with people. So it's a pretty damn good career for that.
Mm.
Um, I think I think it really boils down to what my stepfather taught me. He was a career salesperson. He said to me years and years and years ago, um, Jeff, sales is a great career, and here's why. Every single day, you get to wake up in the morning and look yourself in the mirror and give yourself a raise. And
Yeah.
then all you have to do is go out and earn it. And I love the fact that my income is up to me. I get to go out and what I believe is the right thing when you're selling is to serve people. And if I serve enough people, I get paid well for it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. It is. It's an interesting way of looking at it. That it's not about convincing people; it's about serving and helping, and they make their own decisions.
Yeah, at the end of the day, that's just the truth.
Mm.
The old style of selling. Look, I was raised on the old style of selling. I was taught how to give a great presentation and strong close. I know how to do those things. Now, look, I'm a professional presenter. I present with the best of them. I do it
Mm.
for a living, and I
Yeah.
know how to strong close people. But it's just not what works anymore.
Yeah.
It's really about just having great conversations. Because at the end of the day, if you think about it, Giora, um, the customer really has most of the cards. They can either give you an appointment or not. They can talk to you or not. They can agree to buy your services or products or not, and they can pay you or not.
Yeah.
I used to teach salespeople, you've got to control everything, the entire process from start to finish. But I think about somewhere around 5, 7 years ago, I kind of woke up and said, you know what? We really don't have a lot of control. Here's what
Mm.
we can control. And I suggest that anybody who sells needs to be controlling these things. One, the amount of prospecting you do, because the amount of prospecting you do and your skill at doing it is going to have a direct influence on how many people you actually have conversations with,
Yeah.
which means some of them are going to say yes and some are going to say no, which means you also have a control over how much money you're going to make. So it's you control the prospecting. The other thing that salespeople can control is consistently trying to move the sale forward. I can't force anybody to do anything. And that's
Mm.
why I say it's a conversation or series of conversations, helping them to choose to do business with you. Because look, I've been selling for almost 48 years. I always say, I'm so good at selling, I get paid to teach other people how to sell. But I don't believe I'm good enough to, in not only not me, of the tens of thousands of people I've worked with over the years internationally, all of us together aren't good enough to talk anybody into anything that they don't want, don't need, or can't afford.
Mm.
And that's not my job. It's not my job to convince you of something that you don't want. It's my job to help you get something that you do want or do need, and to help you do that in the easiest way possible.
Yeah.
That's my 2 cents on the subject.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think there is no way anymore, and maybe a few years it was possible, but you cannot force a sale anymore. If you force it and you put pressure on somebody, then usually a day or two later the sale will get canceled. So that way of selling is definitely has changed.
Yeah, and
With
if you think about it, you used a word that I'm very familiar with: pressure.
mm,
First of all, the nature of the customer has changed because the internet changed everything.
yeah,
It's just too easy for people to find out competitive information, including pricing, for most
exactly.
products or services.
Yeah,
So you know, the pressure type of selling, the traditional viewpoint of salespeople simply doesn't apply anymore. And the other thing to consider is when you press against something. If we were physically in the same room and I pushed against you, what would you do?
push back.
You push back, exactly right, because that's what we do. Well, that's the last thing I want. I want to
Mm,
be on the same side as the customer or the prospective customer, not opposing. And that's the traditional view of salespeople. You
yeah,
know, there's a million books written on the subject. They'll use different words, but it's all about how sales is like war. Now, here's my belief. Um, in war, there are not winners and losers. Everybody loses.
yeah,
People die, all kinds of bad stuff happens. But in sales, there are either two winners or two losers. Either
mm,
You don't get my product or service and I don't get your money, or you do get my product or service and I get your money. We either win together or lose together. I think that's a healthier way to look at it. It's really in the most human resources approved way. We have to put our arm around the customer, the potential customer, and say, I'm in this with you. Let's decide together, is this right for you or not? And at the end of the day, they're going to make the final decision.
That's right. It's absolutely right. And as you mentioned earlier, in today's world of internet, many times the customers or the clients will make a decision to use us before they actually meet with us. So the sale has happened already, and it's really a relationship thing. So with working and training so many salespeople, thousands or tens of thousands of salespeople over the last 16 years, have you noticed, excuse me, have you noticed that there are certain attributes that salespeople, that the successful salespeople will have?
Sure. The first one, and I mentioned it a few minutes ago, the most successful salespeople are consistently prospecting. Either their company is consistently prospecting for them or they're doing it themselves. When I go into, I've worked with tiny companies that you and I never heard of until they contacted me. And I've worked with major corporations that everybody knows. I've worked internationally with Cisco and Siemens and Citibank and Aramark and major companies. But inevitably, when I walk into an organization, the first challenge of almost there's two that I walk into most of the time. The first one is their sales managers are not really very good at their jobs. And you need an effective sales manager. Unless you're a sales superstar, you need an effective manager. And the other one is they're just not seeing enough prospects. I get lots of calls from CEOs and company presidents and business owners and VPs of sales, because those are the type of people I sell training services to, as opposed to coaching services. But it almost always, when I start asking questions, which is what selling's all about, it's, well, what is your biggest challenge? My lazy ass salespeople simply are not seeing enough prospects. Well, no kidding. If you're not seeing enough prospects, how are you going to close enough business? I don't care how good you are or what your closing ratio is. If you're not seeing enough people, you cannot close enough business. So that's what I see as the biggest problem that salespeople have. So the flip side of that, people who are consistently doing well are consistently prospecting. Salespeople who are consistently doing well understand that sales is not about your great presentation skills and not about your strong closing skills. Those are both nice to have, but what they really want to do is have three traits. Having worked with tons and tons of salespeople all over the world, I can tell you that every time I've met a superstar, they always have these three traits. The first one is they are the best question askers. Sales is all about asking the questions. It's not about your presentation. It's about asking the right questions. So they're always great interviewers. The second thing is, and this should be obvious to most people if they're listening, if you're going to be a great question asker, you've got to be a great listener. And most salespeople, and this is a technical sales training term, most salespeople suck at listening. We are horrible listeners because we think we get paid to talk. I get paid to talk, but not when I'm selling. When I'm selling, I get paid to ask questions and listen. So first is you got to be a great question asker. Second trait, you got to be a great listener. And the third trait of all great salespeople is they are amazingly wonderful storytellers. They're able to paint a picture in somebody's mind of them already having the product or service that they're trying to sell them and seeing the results of it. And they also tell what I call a verbal proof story. And a verbal proof story is a story about somebody else, like you, Mr. or Ms. Prospect, who by doing business with me lived happily ever after. The reason that's so important is because if you've studied brain science, our brain is wired up to naturally go to the negative first. We almost always think in a given situation, what could go wrong? And when you're buying, you're thinking, what if I make this decision? What if I hire Jeff Goldberg to train my team and I lose a bunch of money and sales don't go up? What would go wrong? What if I deal with Giora and whatever product or service you're selling, and I look bad to my boss and I lose my job? So we have to help our prospect turn themselves into our customer by choice. And we do that by helping them break down the wall that I believe they build up between us and them. And the wall is built there to protect them from making a bad decision. I always like to envision a brick wall. So if I was coming to your office to sell you my services, I envision there's a brick wall that you've built between us. And on my side of the wall, you've hung a sign, and the sign says, I'm not buying anything. And if I do, it's sure not going to be today. Well, I need to help you break down that brick wall for yourself because I can't break it down for you. And the reason for that, Giora, is I'm a salesperson, which means you're probably not going to trust me. At the end of the day, look, it just so happens I'm an honest person, and my integrity after my 3 children and my dog, my integrity is the most important thing in the world. You don't know that because you don't really know me. We met maybe once or twice or 3 times. You still think of me as a salesperson. And in my case, not only am I a salesperson, but I'm so good at selling, I get paid to teach other people how to sell. So you can bet people have their guard up when I'm trying to sell them my services. So I need to tell them a story about somebody else like them who, by doing business with me, lived happily ever after, because that helps them psychologically go, oh, all right, so there was another VP of sales that brought Jeff in and it worked out for them. So maybe it'll work out for me too. So
Yeah.
great storytelling skills, great listening skills, great questioning skills. Inevitably, every time, great salespeople always have those 3 traits.
Yeah. Wow. So do you think sales, 'cause there's always this notion of great salespeople are born salespeople. Do you think some people, or there is such a thing as a naturally born salesperson, or it is things, the skills are things that we can be taught? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, both. I do believe that some people are born with natural traits that tend to make them better at selling, and not just questioning skills and listening skills and storytelling skills. So those are great. But if you don't have those traits, I believe most of them can be learned. For example, if you're an extrovert, you like being out with people, you're more likely to be successful in sales than an introvert. But I know lots of introverts who are highly successful. If you're articulate, you can actually have a conversation with somebody, you're more likely to be successful in sales. But I've met some highly inarticulate salespeople that I've thought I would never have hired this person, but they're very good at their job. If you have integrity, and that I can't teach you, and you either have that or if you don't, if you're honest, because the old style salesperson that would lie and cheat and steal and do anything they needed to close a deal, that's the old days, my friend. It was never a good thing, but that certainly doesn't work well today. Can you rip people off by lying and cheating and stealing? Sure you can, but it's not going to create a customer long term, and eventually you're going to get found out.
That's right.
If you have a good sense of humor and know how to tell appropriate jokes at the right time, if you truly care about people, if you're, you can't see I'm pointing to my rather ample gut right now, but if your come from is truly, I'm here to help you, I'm here to serve you, that makes you more likely. I always hesitate to say this, but so I don't want to make it sound like I'm being altruistic. I love helping people. I truly do. Now, don't get me wrong. I love getting paid for helping people, but it gives me a great feeling of peace and joy and fulfillment when I get lots of these calls and emails and texts from people who I've worked with, whether it's, yesterday or 6 years ago or longer. Hey, Jeff, I tried that thing you taught me and it worked, and I brought in a big deal, or I got a promotion, or I was able to buy in, all those great things. I feel really good about that stuff. And again, don't get me wrong. I love getting paid for it, but when you truly love helping people, that's another trait that makes you great at sales. And there's a laundry list of things. So here's an example. My sister works for a drug addiction program. She helps addicts stop doing drugs. Really a good thing to do. She's not a salesperson in any way, shape, or form. I could train her how to sell. She may never be a superstar because she doesn't have some of the traits that would naturally make her more likely to do that. But I could train anybody how to sell. So can anybody sell if they aren't born with those traits? Most of them are nice to have, but not necessary, and most of them can be developed. And yes, some people are just born that way. Here's another one that I think is important: curiosity. If you're curious and you actually are interested in people, that's another one. Like you're down in New Zealand, right?
Yeah.
Got to get there one day. I'm coming, New Zealand. I just totally lost my train of thought. Wow, where was I going? I got sidetracked by New Zealand because I started thinking about Lord of the Rings. Sorry?
We were talking about curiosity, and then New
Thank
Zealand.
you so much. Perfect. Because when I think of New Zealand, I think of Lord of the Rings. I'm a big Lord of the Rings freak. Anyways, curiosity. So I just happen to be wired up curious. I'm constant. I love finding out what makes people tick and what makes things work. So the reason I was asking about where you are is because here in America, we have a TV program called How Things Are Made. Are you familiar with it? Do you have it down there?
No.
It's brilliant. every episode shows you 3 different products and how they're made. Like, how do they make a tennis ball? How do they make frozen waffles? How do they make jet skis? I'm fascinated by that stuff.
Yeah.
So if you're wired up curious, that's another thing that makes you more likely. But if you're not, you can either be curious or act curious. So most of the things you can either learn or fake.
Interesting. Do you, not so much, do you, sales, a lot of people go into sales thinking, all right, I'll just have a chat with some people and then I'll make some money. But it's more than that. And the attrition rate in sales is really quite better. Most people that go into sales leave the industry. Why do you think there's such a massive turnover in the sales industry? And I think that's sales in general, not just a specific industry in sales.
Yeah, I believe it's because the organization they go to work for doesn't do their job, which means they don't train them properly. They don't support them the way they need to be supported. And most salespeople don't take the initiative. I know I'm a healthy guy, so I tend to go to my doctor once a year. Well, every year when I go to my doctor, who's my age, a lot of experience, there's always books on his desk. He's still reading and learning. The typical salesperson does not read one sales book per year. The typical salesperson doesn't go to a seminar or a workshop unless their boss makes them do it. I always laugh at this because I'm guessing that you have YouTube down in New Zealand. Well, we have it here too. And there's lots and lots of guys just like me with free content for sales training. Now, some of it's crap, but a lot of it is really good stuff. And salespeople simply don't invest in themselves unless their boss makes them do it. Now, one of the ways I judge companies is, do they invest in their people? And that sounds kind of self-serving because I like getting paid to help their people. Yeah. But salespeople tend to not be successful because either they're choosing the wrong product or service to sell, something they don't believe in, which is a big mistake, or they're just not learning their craft, whether they're doing it on their own or their company's doing it. And I think it's less about salespeople leaving the industry of sales. It's that they go from one job to another thinking, oh, I'm not doing well here, but when I sell that thing, I'm going to do much better. But they're going to have that same problem if you don't invest in yourself, or if somebody doesn't invest in your training and your personal development. Then that's why I think there's so much turnover and they go from place to place. And that's why so many salespeople are just unsuccessful. They are always chasing quota. Maybe once or twice a year, they'll actually hit their monthly quota, but most of the time they don't. They're struggling to pay the rent or the mortgage. And it's a shame. Now, from a simply self-serving point, that's great for me because I help people like that. But yeah, most salespeople struggle. Almost any organization I walk into, there's always 1 or 2 people that are killing it. They're always the guys who will come into a training and, they're standing with a Hawaiian shirt in the corner and giving me a look like this, like, yeah, I know all this stuff, but that's not most. It's like anything else. You've got to work at it. You want to become great at something, you got to put in your 10,000 hours.
Yeah, definitely. So if you meet a salesperson, if you go into an organization and you meet somebody or talk to somebody that wants some help, what are some key questions that you would ask in order to go, right, this is the issue, this is the problem, and help people?
Yeah, the first question I always ask is, tell me, what is your biggest challenge right now? What's the thing that's most likely, that's most keeping you from earning more income? So what I'm focused on these days is mostly sales coaching, one-on-one coaching with somebody like yourself who says, hey, Jeff, I'm making $80,000 a year, but I know I can make 100 a quarter. I'm making 100 a quarter. I know I can make 200. So I'm doing a lot of that, as well as large group training for corporations. And I always start out with, what do you think is the thing that's most keeping you from earning more income right now? Now, I almost always know what the answer is going to be, but I want to hear it from them because it's almost always, I'm just not seeing enough prospects.
Yeah.
And so that's almost always the first thing we work on, whether I'm working with a corporate client and training their team or one-on-one coaching. We almost always start with prospecting skills. I teach a course called Professional Prospecting. How do you make a cold call on the phone? How do you use email? How do you use LinkedIn? Things like that. And then once we get past that, once somebody has enough appointments, because if you don't have enough appointments with prospects, I don't care how good you are at selling, if you're not seeing enough people, you can't close enough. Then we can get onto actual selling skills. I have a program called Conversational Selling Skills, and that's the sales process from start to finish. Now that you're actually dealing with a decision maker, how do I actually go from hello to closed? So those are the two things that are typically in the way. And then we look at things like pipeline management and time management, which is also a big one. Most
Yeah.
salespeople are horrendous time wasters. We always think there's tomorrow, and knock on wood, usually there is tomorrow. But the advice I give to salespeople, whether it's a coaching client or a training client or anybody else, and by the way, sales executives, executive leaders in corporations, they all have the same challenge, which is time management.
Mm.
You've got to be working with focus and velocity. And I use those two words a lot. Focus, they're both exactly what they sound like, by the way. Focus means working on one thing at any given time.
Mm.
I'm not going to put you on the spot, but I'll bet if I asked you if you're a good multitasker, you'd tell me, yeah, Jeff, I'm a great multitasker.
I'm horrible at multitasking.
Good.
Cannot do it.
Good for you. By the way, everybody who tells me they can't do it either.
Mm.
They think they're good at multitasking, but it's been proven scientifically.
Yeah.
Your brain can only focus on one thing at any given nanosecond.
Yeah.
And when we try to focus on two things at the same time, both those things suffer. So you want to work with focus. Do one thing, do it well, then move on. And the other word is velocity. Most salespeople are not working with velocity, and it simply means speed. My clients, I tell them, you got to work as fast as you possibly can without making mistakes. In carpentry, in woodworking here, there's an old saying that says, when you're working with wood, measure twice, cut once. It just means, if you need a 14-inch piece of wood and you measure 12 inches by mistake and you cut that, you just ruined the piece of wood. Yeah. So I want people to measure twice and cut once when they're doing selling activities, but I want them to do it as quickly as they possibly can without cutting off their fingers with the saw. So focus and velocity are crucial.
Yeah, very good. New Zealand we've been really quite lucky with the whole pandemic and COVID things. We really are functioning more or less as normal here. But outside, and I know in the US, Europe, things are still quite hard. There are a lot of limits. What are some of the advices that you've been giving companies and salespeople over the last year in order to help them refocus or change or look at their businesses in a different way in order to become or to continue with their business or even grow it more? Because I know a lot of people have actually grown their business over the year.
Yeah. Well, the first piece of advice was move to New Zealand because your prime minister certainly, what's her name again?
Jacinda.
I love her. I really adore her. I mean, look, we get the news from all over the world here, and I'm like, why are we not having somebody like this lead us? I mean, she did it right from the get-go. So it's an excellent question, by the way. The thing that people have to be aware of for selling during and post-pandemic is the first thing to think about, certainly here in the States, because it's still raging, is that everybody is freaking out. Everybody. I don't care whether they like President Trump or don't like President Trump, like Joe Biden who's coming in or don't like him, but everybody's freaking out. Am I going to get sick? Is my family going to get sick? Is my company going to be in business? Can I go to a restaurant? I mean, there's a lot of bad stuff going on here. So we as salespeople have got to understand that the people that we're calling on are absolutely freaking out too. So we have to use a word that my coach uses with me a lot, which is empathy. We've got to use empathy when we're reaching out to people. And for anybody in your audience who knows the word, there's empathy and there's sympathy. Sympathy means I feel bad for you. Empathy means I understand what you're feeling, or at least I'm trying to understand what you're feeling. And that's what I'm talking about here. So if we're cold calling somebody on the phone to get an appointment, we better say something like, hey, I'm Jeff Goldberg and I'm a sales coach. I'd love to talk to you about that. But first, how are things for you? What's going on? How are you? How's your family? How's your business been affected? Have that empathetic conversation. The other thing to do is, and I hate to be a broken record, but you've got to be prospecting. You've got to be prospecting more than you normally would, because it is harder to reach some people. A lot of people here are still mostly working remote. So people are working from their homes where they're used to being in a different situation, usually in an office with a bunch of other people. But that's actually good news, because if we think about the typical human being who works in an office that we might want to sell to, they're used to having a bunch of people around and being able to walk over to somebody else's desk and say, hey, did you see what was on TV last night, or whatever they're going to say? And they miss that. So it really gives us an opportunity as salespeople to reach out and connect with people, whether it's via phone, email, video, or any other methodology, because they're not used to being so remote from people, so alone. Yeah. So it really does give us a real opportunity. The other thing is to make sure that we're always coming from a place of building value. because that's what people buy. People buy two things. And what most salespeople think it is, Giora, is price. People buy price. It's just not true. It's almost never true. I will certainly admit that there are some people who will chop off your knees for a penny, but not most. What people are looking for are two things: relationship and value. So we have to make sure that when we're having these sales conversations during the pandemic, that we're consistently building value. And the only way we can build value is by A, knowing our product or service inside out so we know what the features and benefits are, and B, asking the right questions so that we can discover what would be valuable to them. Because what I think is valuable may have nothing to do with what you're really looking for, even though you may have a need for my product or service. I'll tell you something interesting. Years ago, I was speaking to a guy who does marketing, and he said, you know what would be really useful, Jeff? If we interview your clients and find out why they do business with you. And I looked at him not like he had two heads, but like he had like 15 heads. I'm like, are you crazy? I know why people hire me. And he said, really? You think so? Let me make some calls and I'll get back to you. Well, it was very interesting. He called 5 of my clients and had conversations and got back to me. And the things that he were telling me were not what I thought. Now, in my mind, I believed that people only hire me for one reason: my good looks. No, I'm just kidding. It has certainly not my good looks. It's they want sales to go up. And at the end of the day, that's all I do. Whether I'm working with an individual coaching client or a group of people and training them at a company, they're looking to increase sales. But he found out things that I had no idea about. Here's a perfect example. And this was something I discovered recently. I was having a conversation with a vice president of sales at a company I'd been working with for a year and a half. And we were just finishing the engagement. I had him and the sales managers underneath him in a room. And I said, so guys, I really loved working with you. I'd be happy to do it again anytime. I'm always curious, what did you like best about working with me? And certainly I'm open to any criticism or constructive advice that you have, but what did you like? And to a person, this was amazing to me, they all said, our salespeople have more confidence now. And it was really a revelation for me, because I know what I do for a living. I help people sell better, but it never occurred to me that the reason they're selling better is because they're more confident, because I've given them skills and tools and tips and techniques and strategies that they can use. But the confidence never occurred to me. Well, that's a very useful thing for a guy like me to know, because now you can bet that everybody I speak to, I tell them, well, one of the things my clients tell me that they like about working with me is their salespeople have more confidence. So it's not always what you think. And it's very useful to learn what our customers think about us.
Yeah. Interesting point. Very interesting. Jeff, I have I have run out of questions. I think you've answered all the questions that I've had for you. If people want to get a hold of you, have a chat with you, ask some questions, how do they get hold of you?
Sure. Thank you for asking that. So first of all, I'm happy to talk to anybody. I'm not talking about for money. Again, I love getting paid, but anybody can reach out to me anytime. I truly believe that service is the place to come from, and that's where I do come from. So if I can help anybody in your audience, email me, call me, and I'll give my contact information in a moment. It's my pleasure. And I always tell people this. I promise you, I always have my big boy pants on. And if you're calling me to look, I can't spend 5 hours a day coaching somebody for free. Eventually, we're going to have a conversation about, hey, Jeff needs to get paid for this. But I'm always happy to help. So the first thing is I have a Facebook group for salespeople called the Sales Pro Network, the Sales Pro Network. Anybody's welcome to join. I give advice there. People can ask questions. There's other trainers that I respect and coaches that they can get advice from. I do a live interview just like this one every Friday at 10 a.m. East Coast time. My phone number is 516-608-4136. My website is JG, like Jeff Goldberg, JG Sales, SALESPRO.com. And my email is jeff@jgsalespro.com. And I'm happy to help anybody at any time, really.
Fabulous. Jeff, really, really appreciate your time. I appreciate your knowledge, wisdom, and sharing it with everybody. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me, Giora. It's been a pleasure, really.